Students, as promised, I am finishing up chapter 8 since we didn't get to do that in class last night. So I want to make sure that I go through these last few slides. There's about 20 or so. So some of the stuff that we were talking about last night was brand identity and strategy and really positioning your product to be different compared to the competition. So brand identity must be distinctive and familiar. It could be a name, it could be a logo, colors, the typeface, the design, and slogans. So there's different things that we need to consider here when we're talking about Pacific Foods. So brand personality and liking. The brand should have human characteristics like loving, trustworthy, sophisticated, and in this case, it could be all natural, organic. Profile the brand as if it were a person, someone the target likes or respects. Brand position and leadership, the soul or essence of the brand. It stands for something that matters to the consumer. Leadership comes from being first in the category. So I give the example here of ESPN because they were the first sports channel. So when we think of watching sports on television, that's where we're going to go. So think of Pacific Foods in terms of having that identity that stands out amongst the competition. And if it doesn't, take a look at how they could improve upon that. Brands can benefit from spokespeople, and obviously we don't have the budget for that here with Pacific Foods, but it's important to know that there is a credibility factor. I have two examples here. One is Pink, and she is a representative for CoverGirl, and it generates buzz and awareness and a positive association. And then the one here on the left is the Travis Scott meal. And this has been a big promotion for McDonald's. It's definitely boosted their sales as they are connecting with someone who's very popular with the Gen Z age. Brand identity strategy, brand image. Mental impression customers construct for a product based on symbols and association. So this could have to do with the colors that you use, the packaging, brand promise, and brand preference. Believing that a brand will meet your expectations leads to brand preference. So excuse my dog in the background if you hear something, that's Lola. Brand loyalty is a connection built over time that leads to repeat purchases. So we're all familiar with brand loyalty. Many of us are loyal to a brand, and it's because over time we've connected with this product. So I think of the other soup that Campbell's owns, which is their regular condensed soup, and how for years the Campbell's kids have connected with us with that brand image and that symbol. And then their good is their slogan. And although sales have gone down for them in the past years with the pandemic, they've kind of had a resurgence. And people remember that connection as a child. A brand is an integrated perception that includes fragments of information, feelings, and personal experience, all of which come together to give the brand meaning. So there's a lot of information there. As an advertiser, your challenge is to manage the communication efforts so the fragments fit together to form a coherent and integrated brand impression. So when you create your two advertising messages, it's really one message on two vehicles. They have to be coherent and integrated about this brand. It can't be talking about two separate things. You need to bring that message together and use it on two different vehicles. So this is an example of a company, 7-Up, that we all know, that has carved out a niche position for themselves among all the colas out there. Dr. Pepper, RC, Coke and Pepsi, they were able to create a unique position for themselves, and they called themselves the Uncola. And on the next slide here, there is the actual very old ad that you can take a look at, and click on this YouTube to take a look at it. But it was their opportunity to stand out amongst all the dark colas out there. So position is how the consumers define the product or brand relative to its competitors. So it could be other proteins, other meal options, okay, other than soup. A position must be based on a particular feature or attribute. So it could be something that's high protein, low fat, it's tasty, it's organic, it's vegan, okay? So you take a look at those features and you promote them. That feature attribute must be important to the consumer, locking the brand in the consumer's mind. So that's why in your survey you ask the question about organic, vegan, all natural, people's lifestyles, because if it's not important to them, then those attributes mean nothing. But if it is, you have to find a way to message that to the consumer. Use that information in your messaging. So this is an interesting way to that brands take a look at where they stand against their competition. This is called a perceptual map. And what this map does is, this is for cars, but you could do it for soup as well, or any project you're working on. And what you do is you map out a scale, and in this, it starts at the top with the upscale luxury car down to practical economy. And on the left-hand side, it talks about a conservative family car, and on the right is a sporty, youthful car. And you map out your competition so you can see where there's gaps in the marketplace. I keep bringing up the word gaps in class because I want you to understand that where there's a gap, it means there's an opportunity. And where there's an opportunity, there's a recommendation that you can make to your client, which is, in this case, Pacific Foods. So in this map, you can see on the upper right-hand side, there's a huge gap in the sporty, youthful, luxury area for cars. But notice it's down lower, so it would mean that the price point's probably a little bit lower. But that's an opportunity for a car maker, okay? There's another gap in the far left area for a family car that's kind of in the middle there for a practical economic car, maybe something that's right there on the cusp. There's an opportunity there. So this is just something that you need to be aware of that companies use when they're mapping out their competition. It's not something we use in this class, but it might be a good tool to use to get an idea what your target audience thinks about Pacific Foods. It's really great to show them in an in-depth interview as well. So if you're in my consumer behavior class, you might use something like this. So more on brand positioning. Up here on the right-hand side, you have the Pacific Brands chicken broth. And what I thought was interesting when I was at Fresh Market the other day, as I mentioned to you, and I also saw it in Publix, is that Pacific chicken broth makes for a smaller size, which I think is really smart, because a lot of the time when you need chicken broth, you don't need some big half-gallon size. You need a smaller size for a sauce. And I thought that was interesting that they did come up with this size in the same box with the interesting, screw-on cap for convenience. That's a feature that they have, okay? Marketers identify the features of a brand and its competitors to determine advantages. So this is a great advantage over other chicken broths, because if you can only get the half-gallon size, sometimes by the time you go to use it, it's it's not good anymore. So this is a great advantage that Pacific Foods has. They evaluate the product's tangible features and other intangible attributes. So you think about what are those tangible features that Pacific Foods has and what intangible features. And then you have to identify the relevant dimensions that make them different from their competition. That's why I tell you, go to the store, purchase it, look at what's on the shelf, look at the competition. Where are the gaps? Look at the packaging, okay? Taste it. Look at the variety that they have or the lack of variety. So differentiation and competitive advantage. How does a company compete in that crowded market? Yeah, you look at the soup aisle and it's filled with different canned soups, box soups, larger cans of soup, a variety of dried packets. Product differentiation focuses on key product differences. For parity products or undifferentiated products, marketers often promote intangible or psychological differences. So what I mean by parity or undifferentiated products are things like salt, milk, okay, commodity type products, oil, okay. They do this through branding, and the example I give here is the milk campaign. And I believe we talked about this already, but milk became very popular because of the campaign Got Milk. That campaign has been updated, and you can take a look at the video here of how they updated it with like TikTok videos and made it more relevant to your age group. But milk has had much success in the Got Milk campaign because they brought celebrities in, they brought athletes in, and they made us look at milk in a different way than we ever did before. And they also, another option is you can use what's called a feature analysis, and it involves assessing brand features against the competition's features, such as the convenient sizes, the ease of use, sustainable packaging, different things that make your products that you're promoting with Pacific Foods different from the competition. So I need you to do a little more of a deep dive, as I said, and really get into this project. So take a look at the milk campaign here to get an idea of how creative they were with really a basic product, milk. So the differentiation and competitive advantage. So there's something called the Fishbein multi-attribute model in the textbook, and it estimates consumer preference based on their perception of the features. So what they try to do here is take a look at your packaging, take a look at the competition, and try to draw out some of your competitive features. So one is improve your rating on a key feature, like maybe organic. Change the relative importance of a feature. So maybe the importance of sustainability and recyclable packaging. Demonstrate your advantage over the competitor on a key attribute. So that's when you go and you look at Amy's soup versus your soup. What do we Pacific Foods have that Amy's doesn't? Or you can add an attractive new feature to your brand that the competition doesn't have. And again, that's that organic, non-GMO, gluten-free, vegan, et cetera, et cetera. So that's for you to figure out as part of your research. So Listerine did this many years ago when they were going up against different mouthwashes that were out there. Listerine was the first mouthwash, but their campaign used to be that you have a great, Listerine's great, but you have that menacing breath. Well, Listerine tasted terrible. It was like medicine. And the competition saw that and said, hey, you know what? We'll make a mouthwash that tastes good and has fresh breath and kills germs. We can do that. And so Listerine, you suddenly had competition. So Listerine went back to the drawing board and figured out We don't need to have it all taste like medicine. We can have a citrus and a cool mint and a fresh burst. So we're just not known for that medicine taste. There's a lot of different brand positions out there. And these may help you when you're trying to think about your strategy and messaging for Pacific Foods. So number one, you have the superiority position. We're safer, we're fancier. Preemptive positioning is we're the first in the category. And I think we talked about ESPN, we talked about Pringles potato chips. Then there's the value position, which definitely is not Pacific Foods, but Walmart, we're always the lowest prices. Psychological positioning, Volvo owns that safety position out there. When you're looking for a safe car, Volvo comes to mind. The benefit position, how does it help? You know, it's a satisfying meal that's healthy for you. Usage position, where and when is it used and by who? Competitor strategy, go head to head with the competition. So sometimes that works for companies. I know a lot of cell phone, like AT&T versus T-Mobile, they do a lot of that head-to-head competition comparison. And then there's category factors, competition coming outside of the category. And what I mean by that is, you know, Panera soup, for example, is a soup you're getting at a restaurant. And I think they do sell it now too. So now that's used to be at a restaurant. Now it's infiltrated the supermarket, and now that's become competition for you. There's purpose-based marketing. I know that on the packaging of Pacific Foods, their products are definitely purpose-based, better for the environment, helping farmers. I have the example here of Bombas, the sock company that donates a pair of socks every time you buy them, and they know that they're the most requested item in homeless shelters. So I think that Pacific Foods and their offshoot brands, their plant-based milks, etc., are doing something in this space. Are they doing it well? I don't know. Does it matter to their target audience? That's where you can look in your secondary research. If you did not ask that question in your survey, you can find that information in your secondary research. For instance, Gen Zers are known for wanting to work with philanthropic companies. They like to buy brands that have a higher purpose, but that might not be the same for, say, baby boomers, or there's no evidence of that. So repositioning is another tactic that companies use. Sometimes a brand gets old, but it still has value. So repositioning can work if the new position is related to the brand's core concept. It has to have that same brand essence. And the example I give here is Old Spice. They have been very successful in taking an old brand of like an old man out on a boat, out on the beach here, and repositioned it so that it is a relevant brand, sexy, different, connects with the audience. And I always give the example of when I think of Old Spice, I think of my father, okay? That's what he wore, and that means to me like an old man's product. But there was enough time and space to reposition the product, and they've done an excellent job in doing that for Old Spice. Okay, so let's uncover some of the consumer insights that you guys are going to start looking for in the data you collect. Okay, so in account planning, if you were to work for an ad agency, The account planner is the research and analysis process to gain knowledge about the consumer. You're doing that through your secondary research and your primary research, okay? And you want to know how to relate the brand to the consumer. So the account planner researches a brand and its consumer relationships to devise message strategies, finding clues about how and when to reach the target audience and what to say to him or her. Remember, your message is going to be the message and the voice of Pacific Foods to your target audience. What do you want to say? You will dig around in the information you get back from your research and find out how can we connect. So I give the example here of 8 o'clock coffee. And 8 o'clock coffee, much like Lean Cuisine that we talked about last week, they did their research and they observed their target audience. And in their ads, in 8 o'clock coffee, they found that the morning can be hectic and you're stumbling around getting your kids off to school or doing whatever you need to do, and that cup of coffee is that nice little pleasure zone for you to have a moment alone. And so from their research and insights, that was the best way to message to their audience, to say, hey, this is for you. Take the time out for yourself, have a cup of coffee, and relax on those busy mornings. And that's what they depict in the messaging of their ads. The account planner also has to understand the meaning of the brand, the target audience relationship with the brand, articulate communication strategies, prepare creative briefs based on the understanding of the consumer and the brand, and then again, evaluate that effectiveness of the communication and whether or not you can target your audience. So consumer insights continued here. So we do a lot of research. So you guys are doing a little bit of research because you're doing secondary research and you're doing surveys, but if you're doing more research, it would include focus groups, in-depth interviews, observations of people eating the product or using the product. But you're able to gain a lot of information watching the way someone eats or purchases a product. And it gives you that a deeper meaning behind the attitudes, desires, motivation, and people's opinions. So insight mining is finding that aha moment in all that research that you do. The account planner unearths the target audience's relationship with the brand and the role it plays in their lives. Understanding this relationship is key because an account planner is taking on the role of the brand steward. And that's what you're doing. You're the brand steward and your client is Pacific Foods. You really need to get into this to understand, especially if, money was on the line here. If we're talking about repositioning and that competitive advantage, I have the example here of Amazon Prime, and I have at the top, you can't touch this, because Amazon has created such a competitive edge, even Walmart can't keep up with it. With their fee at the beginning of the year, and then you get, all along the year, you get your shipping for free, and in a timely manner. No one has yet to compete with Amazon, especially during these difficult times. So the creative brief is something you should continue to go back to during this semester. And remember that Mike Bucher gave us that creative brief in the beginning of the semester. And basically it explains what the clients wants. It summarizes what the consumer insights are and the basic strategy. And it is the first step in that creative process. It's designed to be strategic and spark creativity and serve as a springboard. And the client gave that to us. So the creative brief basically says, so what's the problem with the communication? Is it what are we trying to do here? Are we trying to increase likes, increase awareness, increase loyalty, increase or establish a new position? Our target audience is who we want to speak to. Maybe they're heavy users or infrequent users, or maybe we're trying to tap into a whole other new gender. Maybe they only go after men and we want to go after women now. Maybe it's instead of, older adults, we want to go after younger adults. And then consumer insights, this is the major truths about the target audience's relationship with the product, which could be positive or negative, or just somewhere in between. Still in the creative brief here, the brand imperatives. These are the important features and competitive advantage. It's brand position, the personality, and the image of the brand. And then you get into what your communication objectives are. So what do you want customers to do in response to the message that you create for Pacific Foods? Do you want them to feel inspired? Do you want them to purchase? Do you want them to follow? Do you want them to sample? Do you want them to like? What is it you want to do? So really think about that when you're talking about the way you want to message. The proposition or selling idea is what is the single thought that the communication will bring to life in a provocative way? Get creative. Use the insights that you received from your audience to craft that message. It could be something informational. It could be something using video. It could be emotional, something using humor. It has to connect with your audience no matter what. The last part of the creative brief is, what is the reason to believe the proposition? That's the support. The creative direction is, how can you best stimulate the desired response? As I said, are you going to use an influencer, video, social media channels, outdoor advertising? It may be a whole lot of different things, but you only have to come up with 2 vehicles. And lastly, where and when should you say your message? What time of day? What location? Is it in a stadium? Is it on television? Is it on social media platforms? So you hopefully ask that question in your survey so that when you're making recommendations to your client, you can tell them where they should do it, what time of day they should do it, because you have those insights from your survey. So hopefully this helped you guys out a little bit in completing chapter 8. When we see each other next week, we'll go over chapters 9 and 10. Please email me with any questions that you have and make sure that you get your surveys out there and distributed so that you can get that data back and make those decisions.